I remember the taste of ash before I ever stepped onto the ruins of Dawnreach. It's strange, the things memory preserves. Not the speeches, not the war reports. No, what lingers is the way silence feels when it's trying to hold back sorrow. I wasn't there for the killing. I wasn't a soldier, not really. Just a recorder of facts once. But I knew Elian Rowe. I knew what it cost him to kneel in the dust of his people's bones and say nothing as the Empire declared its victory. That silence, that's where the truth lived. They say he surrendered without a shot fired, that he handed over the last human colony to save his own name. They carved those words into the Empire's holospheres, played them between interstellar broadcasts like hymns. A general with dirt on his boots and shame in his veins. What they don't say, what they can't say, is that he tried to bargain with monsters, and monsters only understand fire. The day I found him, the light had a copper hue. Sun low, shadows long, the air thick with the chemical stink of char. He was sitting cross-legged beside a shattered well, rubbing ash between his fingers like it was soil that might still grow something. The last of the banners still flapped above him. Half-torn, Earth's symbol burned away. A crater split the land behind him where the children's center used to stand. He hadn't buried them. There were too many to count. Too little left. He didn't look at me when I approached. Just said, "Is this what you wanted recorded?" I didn't answer him. Not yet. I remember how Lyra Vinci came back. She wasn't supposed to. Medics like her never returned to the sites they fled. But she did. Her shuttle touched down with no clearance, no escort, nothing but a weak ID signal and a silent pilot. When she stepped out, she walked straight to him, not flinching at the way the world stank of betrayal and burned skin. Her face, God, her face, it had the look of someone who had given mercy where war demanded none, and knew she'd be condemned for it. "Elian," she said softly, like she might wake something sleeping in him. He blinked slow, looked at her as though memory pained him more than the wreckage. "You shouldn't be here." "And yet," she said, and sat beside him. I had studied Lear's record. Empire-born, trained in the Dominion's medical academies, assigned to the 3rd Conquest Fleet. But after Dawnreach, she disappeared. Desertion, they said. I never believed it was cowardice. She didn't look like a deserter. She looked like someone who decided death wasn't the only way to be brave. She reached for his hand, not to comfort, but to anchor. He let her. He was trembling, though his face was stone. And then she whispered, "She's gone." He closed his eyes. His shoulders did not sag. They didn't need to. His whole being had already collapsed. "I carried her until I couldn't feel my arms," Lyra continued. She didn't cry. Not once. Just kept looking at me, like she wanted to ask if it had all been a dream. "Nara," Elian said, the name like a prayer too late to matter. He stood suddenly, not fast, but with the kind of movement that demanded the ground take notice. I saw then that his uniform was still stained at the knees, where he must have knelt while lifting bodies. The tribunal's message beacon buzzed quietly from the wreckage of an old comm station. They had sent judgment already. Said he'd be erased. Said a man who surrendered an entire species deserved no legacy. "You recorded their voices?" Elian asked me directly for the first time. I nodded. "Then record this too," he said. "I told the Empire we were laying down arms. I signed a surrender. I used every word I had left to beg them for mercy." He paused, then pointed to the sky, where their ships had hung like vultures. "And they fired anyway. They called it strategic purification," I said quietly. His laugh, bitter, small, cut through the ash like a blade. "They called it justice." "For what?" "For being born with lungs instead of scales." Lyra stood too now, her expression like a tide pulled too far back from the shore. "They don't fear our weapons. They fear our refusal to become like them." Elian turned to her. Their eyes met. There was no declaration, no kiss, no desperate embrace. Just a shared knowledge of what they had both seen, what they had both lost, and what little still remained between them. A low tremor shook the ground beneath us. A shuttle incoming. The tribunal. Elian looked at me again, but his gaze didn't hold anger. It held intent. Record everything. Not for them. For us. For anyone who comes after. Let them know we try to be kind, even when it killed us. I stepped back as the winds from the descending ship scorched the nearby ruins. Its engines hummed like Judgment Manifest. A single pod opened. No weapons drawn. They didn't need them. They thought they'd already won. Elian stepped forward alone. The official stepped out in shimmering armor, flanked by drones with blinking eyes. Elian Rowe, the voice declared, metallic and hollow. By command of the Galactic Tribunal, you are hereby rendered null. Your identity is stricken from the records of sentient history. You are sentenced to permanent exile. Do you acknowledge? He did not kneel. He did not beg. I do, he said. And then he looked up at the drone hovering above, its lens glinting red with imperial indifference. But you won't forget me, he said, because she won't let you. He reached into his coat and held up a small object. A child's drawing, sealed in a protective case. Crude lines, a blue sun, a garden, 3 stick figures holding hands. The drone scanned it, paused. Infraction registered, the voice said. Unauthorized relic retention. Subject will be removed. I watched him step onto the shuttle platform, drawing still in hand. The hatch closed. They think they erased him. But I remember. And now, so do you. The last time Dawnreach celebrated anything, it was the planting of a new orchard just beyond the river bend. Elian Rowe had stood at the edge of the ceremony, arms crossed, a faint, reluctant smile breaking the stern lines of his face as children threw blossoms into the wind and called it magic. Lyra Vinci was there too, in civilian dress, her Empire badge tucked out of sight. She was on leave then, so she said, but even in those days, before the ash and screams, her presence came with silence trailing behind it, like a shadow that hadn't yet learned how to vanish. Back then, the sky was still kind. There were clouds, the sort shaped like animals if you squinted just right. Families came out at dusk, blankets rolled across the tall grass, music humming from old solar speakers. No one dared say it, but everyone knew it was borrowed peace. The Dominion had already pushed beyond the Kuiper Zone, swallowing moons and outposts like breadcrumbs leading to Earth's last settlements. Dawnreach was small, defensible, too far out to bother, until it wasn't. Elian had seen the signs before most. Fewer trade ships, slower supply routes, unanswered hails. He spoke little but watched everything. His people believed in his silence. They thought it meant control, not calculation. At night, he'd read the coded intelligence reports under dim light, marking patterns in orbital drift and shipment anomalies, memorizing the names of colonies that had gone dark. He stopped sleeping entirely after the last encoded message from New Thessalon arrived. 12 words, fragmented and panicked. They're not coming to bargain. Hide the children. Elian, I'm so sorry. When he summoned the town council, he did it quietly. No fanfare, no alarm bells, just a message relayed by voice. Rowe requests your presence. They came. Farmers, builders, 2 retired Marines who still walked like their bones remembered every battlefield. Lyra stood by the door, arms folded tight across her chest. She hadn't been invited, but no one asked her to leave. They'll be here in 3 weeks, Elian said simply. Maybe less. What do they want? Asked Corintal, whose wife taught the schoolchildren music. Elian paused, looked at the calloused hands of these people who'd never seen war. They want us to be quiet, he said. Forever. There was silence, then disbelief, then anger, the kind that chokes itself before it can form words. A chorus of objections rose, but Elian didn't argue. He waited. They wouldn't strike civilians, someone muttered, as if repeating a prayer learned in childhood. They already have, Lyra said. It was the first time she had spoken in weeks. More than once. There are settlements that no longer exist on the record. People whose names were never spoken again. They turned to her. Her voice wasn't loud, but held weight. It had seen things they hadn't. I was at Soren's fall, she added. I patched lungs that collapsed under the vacuum. I wrote the death toll into a ledger, and then I burned the ledger myself because the Empire said it was unverified data. Someone asked, why would they do that? What purpose does it serve? Elian answered for her. Terror. Absolute compliance. Erasure of resistance through the myth of willing surrender. He placed a comm disk on the table. If we try to fight, they'll destroy us in hours. If we try to flee, They'll do it anyway and call it pursuit. But if I surrender, officially, publicly, they may let some live. Corin's voice cracked. May, I'm offering a chance, not a promise. Lyra stepped forward. He's not wrong. If he sends a seal, if he strips our weapons first, the Empire may avoid a public massacre. It's not in their interest to appear monstrous. Not openly. Not yet. You think they care about optics? They care about the lie they're telling the galaxy. Elian said. They need to be the unifiers, the saviors, not the executioners. So we'll give them a show. A peaceful colony. No resistance. A clean transfer. A long silence followed. Then a slow, painful nod from each council member. Later that night, Elian stood on the balcony of the old observatory, looking toward the sky where soon no stars would be safe. Lyra joined him, arms folded against the rising cold. You're gambling everything on their capacity for shame, she said. I'm gambling on yours, he replied. She didn't deny it. You knew the reports. You read them. You saw what they were doing. Why stay? Her breath caught. Because if I left without trying, I would become like them. He looked at her, and for the first time in months, there was softness in his eyes. There's still time. You could take a ship. Disappear. They'll believe you. I won't. You'll die. I've died already, she said, and smiled like someone remembering a lullaby through tears. He reached for her hand. No declaration passed between them. Just a quiet pressure, her fingers curling around his. A gesture, not a promise. That was all they had room for. The next morning, Elian broadcasted the message. He stripped the defense grid, ordered all weapons to be sealed and buried. He made a record of every living soul in Dawnreach and submitted it to the Empire as proof of surrender. He added a personal statement, voice trembling only once, saying, "We seek mercy, not blood. We surrender to protect the innocent. Let that be enough." He sent it. They waited. On the 5th day, the sky broke. There were no emissaries, no negotiations, no communication at all. The orbital strikes began at dawn. Lyra watched the sky turn to flame from the schoolhouse window. The children had been practicing a recital. One of them was holding a paper flower when the roof exploded. Elian sprinted through fire and metal, shouting orders that no longer mattered. He pulled survivors from wreckage, screamed coordinates into a comm line that only spat static. He found Nara in the greenhouse, pinned beneath the beams. Her eyes were open. She didn't cry. She never had. He carried her in his arms while the town died behind him. When the bombardment ended, they stood alone in the orchard, the last blossoms burning at their feet. And Elian Rowe whispered, "I should have let them fight." But Lyra touched his face, tears streaking through soot. "No, you made them human again." In the distance, the Empire's broadcast had already begun. Dawnreach has surrendered. Peace has been restored. But we remember, they brought him in chains made of light, not metal. The Empire had evolved past iron and fire. They broke people with symbols now. Elian Rowe stood at the center of the tribunal hall, beneath the vast dome of judgment where stars were projected in slow, majestic orbit. Dozens of spectators watched from tiers of crystalline seating. Officers, senators, historians, and citizens invited for the spectacle of his erasure. No one spoke above a whisper, not because of reverence, but because the Empire demanded a particular silence when it fed on memory. He wore no insignia. His uniform was unmarked, faded. His boots were still dirt-streaked from Dawnreach's soil, and he refused to let them wash it off. The guards had tried. He'd sat through it, still and mute, until they gave up. His eyes scanned the room slowly, registering no hatred, only fatigue, only the burden of one who had seen too much and lost more. A voice rose from the circle above, a synthetic fusion of law and performance. Elian Rowe, you are summoned before the Galactic Tribunal under Directive 11K for crimes against unity, moral disruption, and complicity in subversive civilian narrative. How do you plead? He didn't answer. The voice adjusted, modulated softer, like a coaxing parent. Do you acknowledge your surrender of Dawnreach and the consequences therein? I acknowledge, he said, finally, that I tried to save them. A ripple of discomfort passed through the chamber. One of the senators leaned forward. You surrendered without authorization. You dismantled military defenses and submitted our empire's forces to shame. You allowed a narrative of innocence to spread, a myth, that humanity chose peace, that we responded with annihilation. Do you deny these rumors? Elian's hands, though bound in light, did not shake. They are not rumors. The hall stilled. For a moment, no one moved. High Tribune Eris, young, polished, born long after the wars had ended, stood from her carved seat. She descended the steps toward him, her robes sweeping like mist behind her. "You're not being judged for your failure," she said calmly. "You're being judged for your influence. That little girl survived, and you let her story live. Nara, the name was a breath, reverent. Yes, she lived, and you kept her hidden. She's not a weapon. She's a child. You used her to fuel rebellion. You gave the galaxy a martyr." He looked up then, finally meeting Erissa's eyes. "No, you did that." She flinched. In the audience, whispers grew teeth. One of the older officials whispered to another. "He speaks as if he has nothing left to lose." He didn't. They turned the lights low, shifting into final sentencing. Eris spoke the decree with careful detachment. "The tribunal finds you guilty of erosion of public trust and post-war ideological contamination. You are hereby stripped of all historical record. Your name, deeds, and biological legacy will be unregistered. You will be exiled under full cognitive nullification." Elian didn't blink. "I thought I'd be executed." "No," Eris said. "That would make you a tragedy. We make you nothing." As she stepped back, a flicker of movement cut through the audience. A figure stepped forward, cloaked in gray, face shielded. Security stiffened, but the figure raised a medallion. "Tribunal clearance." The figure lowered her hood. Lyra gasps, a ripple of outrage. She ignored them, walking slowly toward the center. "I invoke Clause 17. Survivor testimony." "You are not authorized," Eris snapped. "I'm the last living witness to Dawnreach," she replied. "And I have no ties to any human government. I was Empire-born. You made me." Eris faltered. "Let her speak," said one of the older tribunal chairs. "We claim to seek truth." Lyra turned to the room, to all their polished lies. "I was there when the Empire opened fire on unarmed civilians. I was there when children died, clutching musical instruments instead of weapons. I saw Elian Rowe refuse to retaliate, even when it would have made him feel less helpless. I saw him bury more innocence than you will ever understand." The hall was silent. Lyra stepped beside Elian. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "You erased the colony, but you couldn't erase his restraint. That's what terrifies you. That the galaxy might believe kindness survived conquest." Erissa's voice was strained now. "Your allegiance is compromised." "No," Lyra said. "Yours is." She turned to Elian. For the first time in public view, she reached for his hand. No defiance, no rebellion, just quiet human contact. "Let them take my name," Elian said. "But they can't take yours." A heartbeat passed. Eris signaled the guards. "Remove her." But something had shifted. The audience wasn't still anymore. They were leaning in, watching, not afraid, curious. Elian turned his head slowly and looked to the stars projected on the dome above them. "History won't remember what you tried to destroy. It will remember what survived despite you." Then, without warning, the lights across the tribunal began to blink. Not randomly, synchronized. A message, hidden beneath the floorboards of their perfect show. A child's drawing. One image, slowly rendered on the dome. 3 stick figures, a tree, and a blue sun. Nara's drawing. Someone had found it. Someone had sent it. The tribunal burst into uproar. In the chaos, Lyra and Elian were seized, but they didn't struggle. The symbol had already been seen. A single image broadcast across stars. They'd meant to silence them. Instead, they'd made them eternal.